Hey, let's slide over to social. What up?
Hey, what up, Cryptic Geese? Happy Friday. Can you guys hear me clear? Because sometimes the mics are all funny. Cool.
Time you grab the mic, Mr. Elon
Yeah,
Associate.
I'm so sorry, man. I've created so much so much weird sort of I don't know. Yeah. People have weird think I have weird juju on these spaces. Anyway, yeah, so sorry, I was taking notes through the whole discussion. Thanks for the questions from Sydney. And just to identify myself, so I'm a glober. And just wanted to acknowledge
Still,
sort
after
of the
all this flat smacking, you still a
I
Glober?
almost, yeah, and I did get smacked last week. There's no denying that. Learn my lesson. Never join a flat Earth when you got kids on your legs, and so yeah, I won't be doing that again. That was embarrassing. So I'm here. Good conversation. Basically, just trying to keep certain discussions on track, but basically, just want to acknowledge some of the common stuff that even as a glober, I'm going to say acknowledge as true, which is just that number one, yes, have not measured a translational velocity of the Earth. That is absolutely correct. I was surprised by that myself on my first kind of flat Earth Friday, whatever. It's just nothing that's been verified. Next thing is that in a descriptive sense, you can say that certainly Newtonian gravity. So the reason why I put that on the jumbotron is just so that everybody knows what, because it was being talked about with Sydney. So just wanted to make sure that everybody was sort of aware of what people are talking about. And yes, that is a kinematic equation in the sense of like, especially the reduction to classic force equals mass times little g, which is just like that little g, that 9.8 per second. So that's kinematic, and it's basically like you can measure that force. Like it comes from like the raw force equation, force equals mass times acceleration. So that one is like it's kinematic, and it's also just sort of like it's measured, but it doesn't tell you anything about the source of the force. So nobody knows what gravity is,
Yo,
or
social, real quick, not to cut you off, bro. Thank you, man. I
yeah.
appreciate that.
Well, I'm just trying to, I'm trying to find the thing, because we have to speak a common language, right? So I want to. This is the kind of stuff that it's sort of, these are easy wins, and I wanted to give the easy wins before we get into the deeper
Nice.
discussion. Right?
Thank you, man. Nice.
So yeah, so like
The
yeah, so
easy
as far as
wins.
like
Hold on a second, real quick, by the way. Like, you kind of
what
underplayed that, though. An easy win. So you just kind of conceded, though, that the entire description of the sky is just kinematics. That's a huge problem, right? There's no dynamic velocities measured, as you mentioned earlier. So you kind of like, so don't underplay what you just said, bro. Like, let's own it. We have kinematic models of the sky based off of kinematics of things dropping on Earth, right? Let's own
so
it.
I will say, so yeah, so the other thing I'll own for sure is that who was it, Stone? Yes, the what is it, the n body problem falls apart with Newtonian physics for sure, in part because, and this is where we sort of we will differ, is the fact that like the main difference that to simplify for people between Einsteinian description of what is causing gravity versus Newtonian description. So for Newtonian gravity, it is constant, like it's only dependent on the mass and the distance between two bodies. And if you try and do a simulation with that, it's going to absolutely fall apart. Because and that's sort of uh, that's where sort of relativity sort of took over from Newtonian, is that in Newtonian, or sorry, in relativistic gravity, the gravity, like the actual gravitational constant drops exponentially the further away you get. So if you have a constant gravity, like if we had a constant gravity from the sun, like no matter how far away we were from it, it would totally just like screw up every single simulation. But that's why
Okay,
that's, yeah.
one sec, social. I got to check you on your nomenclature there,
Okay.
because you're referring to a constant that changes between here and there, unless
So
I
yeah,
misheard
that's
you. right? If
Yes,
it's a constant,
gravity.
it's a constant. Doesn't matter about how far away you are. It's a constant, right? You can't be
That's
changing
a
it.
Newtonian. That's
No,
Newtonian.
don't matter which system it is. I'm talking about in general. When you talk about your nomenclature and you refer to a constant like a gravitational constant, it can't be changing just because you're farther away from something, right?
If it's
It's
a
a constant.
if it's a gravitational if it's a okay, let's not call it the constant. Let's not call it the constant g. Let's call it little g, like the acceleration. So it drops off exponentially the further you get away from the body, as
No,
described.
that's the thing, social. You just gave it a different name, but the function is the same. It's a constant. Big G is big G is big G. It's 6.67 times 10 to the negative 11 kilogram dyne per. You know what I mean? That's the,
But
you can't be just flipping
but
things around for
that's what
convenience like that.
relativity replaced. That is what space time
Negative.
replaced. That's what.
It's in the field equations, dog. It's literally, and it's backwards covariant with it. Like it didn't replace it. It quote unquote extends it. We can bring up.
They worked around it.
Yeah, we can bring up the equation for it.
No, by all means, social. Keep going on what you're talking about. Formulate your thought. Make complete sentences that we can actually
Yeah,
follow. And
right.
I'm with you, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, the main thing I want to say is that it's not surprising that a simulation based on the classical Newtonian law of gravitation falls apart in an n-body problem. Newtonian where the Newtonian kinematics sort of ends in terms of usefulness is as soon as you get any distance away from like the Earth's surface or whatever. So it's
There you go
fine for
again.
so it's fine for calculating force. Like you can calculate the force of like the force in newtons of anything like on the surface of the Earth using force equals little g like mass times little g, and it'll give you a force. It doesn't give you the source of the force. Um, so that's what I'm saying that globe Earth and flat Earth agree is that we don't have a definitive source of that force. There's no gravitational particle. There's no like so that I think we can all agree on. So that was kind of like the main thing that I was thinking about while going through this conversation with Zrinkin or whatever his name is. I
That
think
was
he's
Didney. Okay,
Zip.
great.
Okay.
But that's the thing. You're applying a principle to reality. You're saying that when we're a bunch of little ants down on this surface here, that we have this cause and effect that we can use with a formula. But as soon as we move away from the surface,
No, but
then
you
I
can
don't know
measure it.
about that formula anymore. You
No,
know,
no, but you can
that's
actually so yeah, but you can measure the like the force equals mass times acceleration. That's like a that is a universal kinematic equation. Like
but there are no constants in that formula.
you can use it for well the constant is 9.8 meters per second per
There are
second.
no constants in that formula. You're saying that it's 9.8 on the surface because of where we are and that's affected by R. It's not a constant. We're talking about big G, right?
Yes, but in all intents and purposes from the perspective of so the reason why it's treated as quote unquote constant is because unless you're getting at a distance r away from planet Earth, so there's that r
You didn't
squared and
finish
then
the
there's
sentence.
hmm?
You didn't finish the sentence. You speak half a sentence and then you change it over to something else. You're not actually making a point, social, and I'm trying to arrest you on that.
So in the original, okay, so this the graphic that I put up didn't put the two radius because there's two radii. There's the radius of the Earth and there's the radius between the masses, which is like between say for example the Earth and the Moon.
The first of
So
that value doesn't apply at all to the formula. It doesn't matter what the radius of the Earth is. That is merely a function of the Earth's density and its mass, right? That's got nothing to do with the formula. Keep trying.
okay, hold on. This is why then.
It's only about
Oh,
the center of mass and the radius between them, not the space they
right.
occupy, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, exactly. So this like so there's no argument for me that this fails. Like this is a known
Well, good.
like a
That just leaves us to talk about cause and what causes gravity. And we've
right.
all agreed by the eruption here that the absolute desolation of the kinematics here, we're saying that it is no longer rational to speak of the cause in terms of mass attracting mass because we have just mathematically and
Yeah.
realistically,
I
observationally disproven that, right? So let's stop talking about that.
no, but you acknowledge that there is a force.
Well, yes, that's why I said we should be talking about
Okay. Okay.
cause. And that
Okay.
it's
So
not
we're
mass
right.
attracts mass, because we just
Okay.
figured that out, right?
So
You have to
that's
acknowledge
fine.
that before we can move on.
Well, the thing is, so like 2 weeks ago, I would have acknowledged it, except that they've had the first quantum measurement of gravity, and the problem is it hasn't been repeated. It
Social,
has
come
not
on.
been repeated. It has
Let's
not
not
been
straw man it.
repeated.
Let's
No, it's
not
not
straw
about
man
strawman.
this. Come on.
It's not about strawman.
We just talked about the astrophysical aspects of Newtonian mechanic and the formula that everybody's been handling since high school. And there's
Yeah.
two M's in it, and there's a big G, and there's an R. Okay.
But F
And
equals mass times little g still works.
you're bringing up another
for
formula,
every
and you're
single
not talking about what I'm
no,
talking about. I'm
okay.
not into this social. I'm not running the race. I want to talk about one thing at a time. And we can't get past one thing to go to the next thing until we agree on the first thing. And that is that this formula implies mass attracts mass, and that is bunk. And you can't look at it at the micro level or the macro level one at a
But
time and ignore the
measure the
other.
acceleration. You can measure the acceleration induced by
Okay,
gravity.
so let's talk about cause.
Okay. There, let's move on to cause. So that's where globe earth and flat earth kind of disagree, is about cause. I've heard a number of different things in terms of flat earth descriptions of what causes the kind of downward force, which equals that little g, whatever. We're sort of we're in disagreement of like the source of that force.
Okay, so when I address cause, and you can peg me as a flat earther tonight, let's talk about cause. How much do you know about the laws of static charge? Like, you got
Quite
a
a bit.
ping.
So
Okay, great.
right on. So yeah. So the biggest problem with the electrostatic model for gravity is that uh, EM fields, electromagnetics, electrostatics are dual polarity.
They are
Not
different
uni-
things.
they're
They are
not
different
unipolar.
mechanisms.
Gravity is unipolar. This is the biggest problem that flat Earth has to solve.
But
You can talk about
electrostatics are a
you can
function of
talk
voltage.
you can talk you could talk about field strengths. You could talk about Gaussian surfaces till the cows come home.
I'm about
Until
to,
you
in a
resolve,
way you probably haven't anticipated. And
uh,
instead of lecturing
until
me on it, you should hear what I have to say.
you resolve the dual polarity of electrostatics and electromagnetic fields and the like, it is not a viable model for gravity.
Okay, I'll
Instead of
take
straw
it.
It's not.
manning, why don't you?
No,
It's
no,
Instead of
okay.
it's
straw
not
manning,
strong.
why don't you steel man it? Why don't you
No,
steel
No, no,
man the
no.
argument instead of
I'll
straw
steel
It's
manning
man
it?
it
okay.
right off the bat. I'll
Okay.
steel man it right off the bat.
Oh my God.
Electrostatics has two poles, just like they have a positive. It's like electrostatics is dependent on two charges, and if gravity
No,
had,
no, there's no two
if
charges to
gravity had
talk about.
anything if gravity had anything to do with two opposing static charges, you'd be able to create anti-gravity boots instantaneously. So I'm sorry, but the electrostatic model does not work.
Okay,
It's
you've had your
done.
fun. You've had your fun. Do I get to speak now?
Yes, you do. Go for it.
All right. So back to static model. Okay. When you charge something and you look at the gradient of the field coming away from it in terms of field strength, the field strength is always thought of, always measured, always seen, always formulated that it is strongest at the surface. And as you come away from the object, the charge attenuates, right? The field strength goes down according to R, right? Static charge on something like, a balloon. You rub it in your hair, you hold it out in the air. Does that make sense, social? That when you're closer to the balloon, the static field coming off of it, you can measure that it is stronger, closer to the surface. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Great. Now, let's talk about Earth. In Feynman lectures, in the textbooks, they always talk about the ambient voltage gradient over top of the surface of the Earth. You familiar with that?
Yep.
Okay, great.
It's been talked about, and different field strengths
Fabulous.
talked about.
Fabulous. Now, answer the question that I'm about to ask, and that is, why is it, in light of what I just mentioned about static charge and field attenuation away from the surface, why is it that voltage goes up as we move away from the surface? This is an electrostatic phenomenon. Why does the voltage gradient appear inverted? And linear, for that matter, instead of according to R. It's linear. It's a per distance linearity relation, 100 volts per meter. I'm sure you're familiar with the figure. Why
I'm
is
familiar
that?
with. Yeah, so I'm familiar with field like strength units and whatnot. To be
Great.
honest, I do not know that field strength increases as you leave the surface of the
Oh,
Earth.
come on, social. Stop denying what's in your own
So,
textbook.
so I can have I can have a guess, which is that no, I can't even guess. No, it's
Well,
like
exactly right. And you see, this is where your model breaks down in
no, because
regular
none of that,
science. Social, hold your
dude, none of this
tongue
matters.
until we have a conversational dynamic going on. You speak, I give you some time, and then I speak. And in the middle of what I'm speaking, you should be listening instead of formulating your next argument. Try to receive the next point that I'm making. This is how conversation goes.
Well, you interrupted him from the beginning, though, Stone. Like he
I
was on a roll.
I let him
and you
speak for a
Hey,
minute and a half,
we
Bartek.
don't need
Come
side
on.
moderators, bro. These are grown men sorting it out in real time. Let these two gentlemen speak. No one else has to interject right now. Please
Thanks,
continue.
Alan. And I'm still looking, social, for the answer to the question: why is it that there is linear voltage in gradient increasing in the ambient where we stand? Why is that the opposite of static charge theory? Why?
I don't believe that this is correct until I can verify it.
It's in your
And
textbook. You don't need to verify this 100 volts per meter. It's there. It's
okay,
Feynman
so
forward.
to keep the conversation going, let's assume that you're correct. Continue all the way through, like rather
Hold
than
on, we'll
stop.
post it up top for you, social. Hold up, we'll post it up top
We're
for you.
already there. There's nothing to continue through anymore. You need to answer the question. And you're saying that you cannot answer the question. That means only, really, that only
No,
means
no,
one thing,
no,
social.
no, but you haven't answered my question, which is that it doesn't matter what the field is doing above the Earth. Like if it's an electrostatic field, it has polarity, and that is like until you resolve the polarity problem, there is no possibility of electrostatics being the reason that keeps things on the ground.
In
That is a
making that statement, you are conflating electrodynamic mechanics with electrostatic mechanics.
it's the same shit, man.
No, it is not the same shit, social.
They
Don't
involve
go there.
they very much involve dual polarity.
No, no, they don't.
They've absolutely tried. Believe me, they tried really hard when they were looking for the great unifying theory of both like cosmological model versus sort of at the atomic level. They tried really hard to measure whether or not electrostatics could be a potential source for the force that is gravity, and it all failed miserably. And
You
trust
couldn't
me,
be more
they would have loved to integrate electrostatics. It would have made everything so much cleaner. It would have made our whole universe make sense earlier. It does not fit.
It's again a problem that you're trying to equate the mechanics between electromagnetics and electrostatics because they are not the same thing. Electromagnetism is a conjugate pair with dielectric force. And this is the thing that we are always looking at with conduit going through, with charge being um, resolved through a conduit like a piece of copper, which is what we all got going on in our walls and our electronics and everything else. That electromagnetic pointing force is an entirely different dynamic, physically speaking. The electrostatic force is a function of a voltage gradient held between parallel surfaces. Okay, this is how a capacitor functions, and it involves counter space in a similar way, but not the same way. It is a different physical mechanism. And what happens in between those two plates is what we experience right here on the surface of the Earth, right down to the voltage gradient that I'm citing. The ambient voltage gradient is exactly replicated inside a capacitor. What that says to us is that we live inside of a capacitor. You just can't find the other surface.
And I'm saying, even if we did live in a giant capacitor, that the fields between the two plates would have nothing to do with the force that keeps us on the ground.
What do you mean fields plural between the two plates? There is only one.
And I stress the fact that if what you're saying were true, if it is true that we are living in a world in between two giant, like effectively in a giant capacitor between two plates, two charge plates, positive and negative. So if that were the case, it would be strikingly easy. Like basically, my question to the floor is where are my damn gravity boots, anti-gravity boots? Because it would be incredibly easy to reverse the polarity of those boots and be able to like float within that field.
We've seen Veritasium do it. We've seen Witsit do it. Where have you been?
All right, you've seen them floating.
We have seen them take two plates and flip the polarity so that the ground plate is on the top and the charged plate is on the bottom, and we lift lighter particles using an acceptable level of power and voltage, non mostly non-lethal for our, the safety of the people conducting the experiments and the sake of practicality and surviving the ordeal. That this has indeed been replicated many times, and it is a very common principle. Everybody is quite
So,
aware of
so,
this, apparently, except you.
so thank you for acknowledging that even assuming that a human being could be like positively or completely positively or negatively charged, so that you can manipulate them in the field. Thank you for acknowledging that the field strength in order to do that would kill them.
I didn't say that we're charging the individual. I'm saying we're putting particles inside a field inverted from what we experience in the ambient situation. And yes, we're using a non-lethal level because in ambient, we're talking about hundreds of millions of volts between the surface and the top plate. Okay,
And
people,
that's what's required to actually like move small particles. Show me a human being that is being either held down or in the opposite. You can create an opposite polarity device that like, so show me a person who's being levitated by pure electrostatics.
this is a red herring, right? You know
It's
that this is
absolutely
an
not a red
objection
herring.
based.
This is
You
right at
just
the
heard
core of your model.
social. All you're doing is saying, "Oh yeah, well you can do it with little teeny particles, but you can't do it with a big thing." And I just explained why nobody's even attempting to do it with a big thing because of how dangerous it is.
Well, they did it, I think, with a frog. They levitated a frog, I hear, with some
Yeah, sure, that
magnets.
would be
Yeah,
fine. Yeah,
yeah, they've done some experiments like that, and I think what social media is failing to understand is that the gradient naturally wants to dissipate, right? So, like the balloon, like you said, the charge goes down as you move away from it, but as we move away from the Earth, we see that the charge is going up. So it's like the opposite, right? So that's exactly what would keep everybody stuck to the ground. It's just that social doesn't understand that, he's thinking about positive and negative when you really don't need to have. You just need to have charge for the force to act on it. You know.
precisely. And we
The
have to come to the
definition of
realization
charge.
I think it's
that there is no such thing as a negative charge.
Yeah, yeah. We just use the conventions positive and negative, but we really don't understand what that means. We just knows that it has a direction to it, right? And so that direction is the one that where you have more energy tends to, due to entropy, wants to go to the lower energy state, and that's what we
Yep.
call positive and negative. But that's not really what's happening.
In electronics or electrical constructions, we like to speak of floating a voltage mid structure of all of the electronic hierarchy that's going on in your device or whatever it is, that you could essentially create a zero voltage state roughly at the middle of the total electrical potential of the machine, such that things with lower voltages than that are viewed as negative, but it's only relative to the ground plane that they're inserting into the middle of their electrodynamics. This is where the nomenclature fails, and people tend to misperceive what's actually going on there.
So not only is there a polarity problem with that model, there's also a directional problem. Because if what you're saying is true, then for example, like it would, first of all, it would contradict the radial lines of the Earth's electromagnetic field. Like the reason why compasses align with magnetic north is because the magnetic field lines are coming from the north.
But social,
And whereas what you're describing, it would contradict that.
no, it wouldn't, because you're talking about magnetic, and this has nothing to do with it. You see, you're conflating it again. It has nothing to do with this. Okay. Electrostatics are a matter of voltage, potential, and gradient, nothing else. There is no magnetic component to consider in the gravitational equation.
Actually, no. Like electrostatics has everything to do with the charges of different different particles of matter. So it's literally the forces that keep molecules together, and dependent on the interaction between the energy bands of different elements on the elemental chart. Um, like it's literally the force that like forces molecules to turn into different bonds for different proteins, different complex molecules, all that kind of stuff. So it has everything to do with positive and negative charge. It has everything to
Social.
do with and what I'm saying is that the electrostatic like I don't know how many which ways to say it. You can define that field any which way you want. You can create a mental model that our Earth is a giant capacitor. None of it applies to this force that we call gravity. I
Your
would be willing.
indoctrination is showing.
I would be willing to I would be willing to interpret, like, so for example, so I accept the possibility of an ether because of the fact that we have not discovered a gravitational like we haven't discovered a graviton. We haven't discovered we haven't discovered a gravity charge, let's put it that way. And therefore you so therefore you could argue that within this ether, because it's an open-ended question. I'm throwing you a bone here. I'm saying that there is room for possibility for some as yet discovered thing. Okay,
Okay,
but
social.
insofar as
Hey,
electrostatic, it's done.
hey,
It's blown.
okay, social. Your indoctrination is showing. And when you talk about what holds particles together and stuff, let's get back into the books you went through in post-sec, just like I did. Um, hey man, what is this deal about? We got the weak nuclear force, we got the strong nuclear force. Why do we have these? These are mathematical band-aids to keep your model
Exactly.
together, right? None of it is valid, social. We were all lied to, and it's time to let it go and pursue the facts.
Except this is measurable. So when you're
Oh
talking
my
about
God.
these forces, they measured these forces. These forces decay like to the third exponent as soon as you get away, like as soon as you increase the distances. So if you create a scenario where like two atoms of a certain thing that have a very very strong bond are like microns or nanometers apart, that force weakens exponentially. So
No, no, because the whole model breaks down when you start getting really close. So like the electrons and the neutrons and all that stuff. Like if it was true that these are positive and negative, like we are theorizing them to be, they'd collide instantly, and they don't. It's you don't
Because
have such a it's all
exactly,
bullshit.
Daniel.
Yeah, it's all
Exactly,
bullshit.
because the orders of magnitude have not been considered. The orders of magnitude between the absolute mass of a particle, and even, and I want to revisit that in a sec, as opposed to the forces we are invoking to hold them together. Those forces are so many orders of magnitude beyond. And exactly
That's
like
right.
Daniel says, that if we did invoke them, everything would instantly implode at that level. It's just arithmetic or mathematical sleight of hand that we were all handed at post-sec level, social. Um, and there was a point I wanted to bring
except that
back
we
to you.
measured this.
Pardon?
I said, except that we know these forces, we've measured them, we've known what's needed to overcome them in terms of splitting the atom when we created nuclear power. Like this is like you're acting like this is not well known.
Okay,
It is quite
nuclear
well known.
power is not about splitting atoms. That's just about taking advantage of decay rates. All right. That's about purifying stuff and having it uh, exhibit heat. And that's not about splitting atoms. Okay. Again, you're not going to get anywhere with me. I'll tell you now, with the Rutherford Bohr model either. Okay, because none of that is falsifiable, nor verifiable, nor observable, regardless of what the cool current science.com articles will lead you to believe, with very interesting expressions to describe what they quote witnessed or saw on the screen. It's just, you're not going to make any headroom there. There was another point in the middle I wanted to bring back to you, but I'm losing it because it's 3:30 a.m. my time right now. But no, there was just more to it. The conflation, the measurements you say that you're taking. Finally, I got there. Yes, you talk about these measurements, these electromagnetic force measurements with relating to the compass, and I'm sure magnetic declination and all of these other things we measure at the surface. Well, those are again conflated with the electrostatic force in the ambient voltage gradient we experience right here on the surface. And it really doesn't come to much because we're literally standing on the ground end of the gradient. We cannot know, standing down here, nor flying a plane at 80,000 feet, we cannot know what the total charge potential is at the top. You know what I mean? What the actual voltage is at the top. And tailing on to this point, I would ask you a skill testing question, Social. What is lightning and what causes it? Go.
To be fair, I started looking into this and I stopped. But I do know, like, all that I know is that there
That's
is
interesting. That's interesting, bro.
there's static charge that that can build. So the reason what I did not know is that is the point of arc. Okay, but I have something to say about lightning. Okay, not just because I don't know how the charge builds in the clouds, and also how the charge. So I thought the clouds would always build to negative or whatever, and that's not true. You could have some clouds that build a negative static charge. You can have some clouds build a positive static charge. That's why you could have, once it reaches like a critical level where you have enough of a charge on both sides, you can actually arc between clouds. You can have lightning between clouds. But both of those charges can arc to ground at a certain critical charge.
Okay, let me take you to task on your analysis and how narrow it is. All right, you're talking about the clouds, and how the top end on clouds is what, 30,000 feet ish, give or take.
Again, I
30,000
don't know. I don't know.
feet. That's
You,
what you're
you
going
can
to
you
find.
can just describe things
That's
without
where
asking stuff
that's where
because I don't
clouds
know.
are, right? I'm just trying to move you through to the point, and we have to establish things along the way. That in your analysis, you're talking about clouds and how static charge seems to be accumulating there somehow, in what you see happening in your own mind. All right. Now the point is that clouds are actually relatively fairly close to the Earth, and only they do not go all the way up to 100 miles up. There are no clouds up there because there's no atmosphere up there, right? So what I wanted to bring your attention to were all of the innumerable videos that are out there of people getting into their Learjet with their cool analysis and their awesome cameras and stuff, and they look them out the window at an electrical storm, and they see lightning coming down from in excess of 90,000 feet. No clouds involved. What's causing the lightning?
Admittedly, so I don't know that phenomenon. I couldn't speak to it, to be honest.
It's such a basic thing, though. Weren't we all taught about lightning and post-sec, like to no end? This is a basic
Not
concept, right? You
no.
shouldn't be stumbling on this.
Quite honestly, no. This is like, I mean, you go ahead and explain to me what like you're
I was
building
waiting for
in.
that, and I'd be glad to. Ready?
Okay,
Here it
okay,
is.
go for it.
Now we just established that there's a voltage gradient linearly going up, at least linear as far as we can track from the surface. Whether it remains linear, I don't really care. The point is that it keeps increasing as we go up, and we'll just leave that at that. The thing is that I discussed the dynamics of the capacitor, and what we see when we build a capacitor, we give it a voltage rating based on the dielectric that's put in between the two plates, and how good of an insulator that stuff is, that prevents the top plate from catastrophically failing and arcing towards the bottom plate, resolving the charge via a spark gap mechanism. And what we are observing on Earth is precisely that. That the second Gaussian plate, the one not under our feet, the one we can't seem to agree on where it is or what it is, that is definitely up there. It is observable. There is no other cause to talk about. What we are witnessing is the catastrophic failure of the capacitor inside of which we live. That the voltage is being overdriven from the top. People talk about, mainstream talk about, gee, lightning hits the earth 60 times per second. Well, yeah, I believe that. And I'm thinking that's because of the cause being the upper Gaussian plate is being constantly overdriven with voltage, and it is constantly catastrophically failing to ground. And that is what we witness in the phenomenon we call lightning.
Wow, I was brainwashed to think that it was like the charges in the clouds and stuff. This is the first time I hear about this.
Exactly. And I
So-
like to bring people out of that cloud, mental cloud, good pun, hey, and show them the real physics, what's going on, and just to consider only what is going on and look at a representative physical model. Isn't that what most globies demand? I'm giving you one right here, and I don't see any refutation to the obvious physics of what we observe.
So the problems with what you just described is, number one, you're effectively talking about the capacitor continually shorting itself. So basically, like temporarily, like wiping out the local
Hold on.
charge,
Hold
which
on.
would mean that
I
there would
never
be
used the word shorting.
localized periods where people would lose grip on the earth because whatever the electrostatic gravitational force would suddenly short, and people would suddenly start floating into the air. Like
Okay,
this does not make sense.
two things. One, I never said anything was shorting. That implies physical connection one to the other and a complete dump of the charge. Okay, that's obviously not going on here.
Arcing is also a
Yeah,
dissipation of the charge.
Okay,
no, but
yes, it is, but it is not complete dissipation of the charge if it only happens for a fraction of a second. And we're talking about the scale of the Earth and the net charge across that plate across the entire world, right?
yeah, the
One
dielectric
little
is
lightning
huge.
strike, one little lightning strike is just a couple of megajoules of energy compared to the total charge across the top. Okay, you've got to embrace scale when you want to make an analysis like that. Okay.
So
Yeah, it's
even if you want to treat the atmosphere like a dielectric material, okay, let's stop talking about a capacitor. Let's talk
Air is
about
an insulator.
let's talk about a transistor, okay, where depending on how the dielectric is biased, current will pass through, and like
Oh, come
so
on, man. Hold it. Hold
so
it, social. Transistors, that's doped silicon by conduction,
well, it's a better
inducing
model than what you're
electrical
working with.
voltage, not electrostatics. It's an entirely different mechanism using entirely different materials, a whole different set of different densities. No, social, we're not going there. Come on, man. Stick to the one
So the
thing.
bottom line, it works better than your model. Like the bottom line,
It
at
doesn't work
least
at all. It's a totally different thing.
we both agree that this doesn't work. Like no matter how you slice this pie, electrostatics is not the force that keeps us on the ground.
Where does a spark gap dynamic come into play with a transistor?
If it, I'm to be honest, I'm grasping at straws, but you can induce a
Up,
current.
social, think hard
You
before you
can induce a
speak.
current. You can induce a current. What I was trying to say is you could argue that the spark gap was like the induced current of a transistor based on achieving a certain bias. But the bottom line is you're right. It's a bullshit model no matter how you slice it.
Thank you.
But to be fair, we can agree to disagree on this. I don't want to like
No, I
I'm
just
not going to
thanked you. We're
conclude.
there, man. We're there. I thanked you. You're good, man.
Yeah. So okay. So I don't know if there's another topic or sorry, the other stuff that was talked about. We talked about ether. So that yeah. So that part, just going back to sort of the stuff that for me is still sort of like decent on the table as far as like discussing the model, the physical model that could change is that yeah, like there is the potential for an ether for a as yet undiscovered component of the universe that both explains things like dark matter. I mean, it could toss the entire model out. I'm not saying that that's not possible. Okay, but I'm saying it would be a pretty big leap. If it happens, it would be extraordinary. It'd be wonderful. It'd be a fantastic day in science. I think the argument that like we wouldn't like that the scientific community wouldn't accept a replacement model out of some reverence for Einstein, I think is unfair. I think if certainly if it explained like certainly if it tied together everything, in other words, the big scale and the small scale,
So
it
you're
would
looking for a
be
unified theory now. Oh, social. What association are you making there between electrostatics and the need to look for dark matter? I'm wondering how you got there.
I was just talking generally about like ether, but I guess I'm just trying to make room for alternative description. So, for example, like yeah, there could be a reasonable descriptor for a force that keeps us on the Earth that is by this ether that we originally failed to measure, but maybe that's because our measurement techniques were poor, and that is the thing that's causing us to stay. And it's a unipolar force. So, in other words, it's whatever it is. If it's not related to mass, could be related to anything else, but it's a unipolar force that you cannot flip the polarity on as you can with electrostatics and with electromagnetics. Then that would be a reasonable theory for flat Earth. Or yeah,
Okay. Okay, so you spoke a lot about ether there in mostly astronomical terms. I'd like to help you out a little bit on the mechanical, and possibly shift your perception of how you think about ether. Let's relate it to the term counter space, and let's involve both the electromagnetic force, the dielectric force, and the electrostatic force. Okay, when we look at ether in terms of the mechanic, what's really going on? We have to use a term to to explain via the correct nomenclature what we're talking about when we talk about electromotive force, like inside a coil to produce the B field, like in between two plates when we have that electrostatic gradient, like when we apply voltage to a wire from here to there and there's ground on one side and there's a charge on the other, that we categorize as dielectric forms of voltage, hot power, if you will. In in the strictest terms here, we have to ask ourselves about the things we do not see when we're making these measurements. Inside a coil, for example, sure, we're driving current through the copper. However, there is this magnetic component which appears from out of nowhere, and it appears along the axis of of the coil that you've wound. Internally is where you find it strongest, much like the static force um, analysis that we started right at the beginning. Okay, where does that come from? Is the question. Again, when we have a capacitor and we hit it with voltage, we start to measure something in joules that seems to be disappearing into somewhere between those two capacitors. And we have to jam stuff in between them to keep one from arcing across to the other through actual physical space. So, guys like Eric Dollard and the rest of his generation, they used a term called counter space. And this is where I wanted to address the overall concept of the mechanics of ether. And it comes down to a really simple question you can ask a fifth grader. It's where do you put it? Where's this energy going? Where's it coming from? And this is how we, I think, should think of ether in terms of the mechanics. That ether is merely the presence of a mechanism in counter space that we invoke through creative uses of voltage and charge. How does that grab you?
okay. Oh, so now, by the way, do you have like any kind of reference to anybody who like has manifested these ideas on paper?
I did refer to Eric Dollard.
Yeah, Eric Dollard. Okay. So so that's interesting. So what you just described, so that would be a reasonable, interesting theory. So in other words, like
Thank you.
you're talking about you're talking about this okay. You're talking about a medium that is somehow responsive to a field that is pushing on us. um I'm just gonna give it to you, Stone. Okay, I don't want to argue with this all
I
day.
didn't say it was pushing on us. When did I say that?
Well, sorry. I'm assuming. Sorry. How does what you just described translate into manifest phenomenon that we see?
Okay, let's just address one facet. How about the magneto-electric effect? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Magneto-electric effect?
Mhm.
I don't know.
Okay,
I'm
no
like,
problem. It's the exact opposite of the electromagnetic effect in regard to the coil I just described. We pumped voltage through the coil, and a B field, an electromagnetic field, a B field that is polarized north and south, the way we talk about it with conventional nomenclature, forms inside that coil, right? Just because we're running current through the copper. There is a B field there. It is
oh,
created through
oh,
the
sorry.
action of
Yes.
extinguishing charge.
Yeah.
Am I okay? Am I roboting or something?
No,
You good, Stone? You good?
Okay,
sorry.
good.
I was just acknowledging. Sorry, I was just acknowledging what it was. Yes, I understand. It's
Okay, so
basically
that's the
the
electromagnetic
generation of
effect.
electric current with moving electric fields.
That's the electromagnetic effect. The magneto-electric effect is the reciprocal. When you take a magnet, it has allegedly a static magnetic force emitting from it at all times, which we have demonstrated with the old iron filings deal, right? And we can disagree about what that represents, but that's tertiary to the argument. The point is that we move that field across, transverse across the coil itself, and that induces voltage in the coil, right?
Correct.
That's the magneto-electric effect. Now, the point is, how are we making that happen in terms of the mechanics? What's going on? Because the magnet never touched the coil. Okay, the coil doesn't really know the magnet is there, but counter space does. It is all around us, it is through us, it is universal, it is ubiquitous. Counter space is there along with space, and it is across that rift, that dimensional rift, mathematically speaking, where these mechanics take place, where these mechanical processes actually occur. And the one that we're talking about here, the magneto-electric effect, is observable, replicatable, duplicatable, indisputable, right? The point
So
is, nobody is agreeing on cause. And I'm suggesting it right here that this has to do with the intimate relationship of the ether mechanics that are involved in counter space.
so just so we're on the same page. So just to be clear, so you are an advocate, or you believe the Maxwell's equations, right? The transforms between electric field and magnetic field, like that's something that you acknowledge, correct?
That there is a perpendicular relationship between them.
Yeah,
That's
and
straight
that,
up, sure.
and that you can convert between the two, like it's effectively
Just as
like
I
a
described.
yes, yeah. So the funny part is that you're saying that this requires an ether, like, so now we're moving away from gravity. So you don't need an ether to describe why um, why moving a magnet creates an electric charge and vice versa.
I'm not quite catching there. Could you bring that down to fewer than 50 words per sentence?
So you don't need an ether to describe how and why an electric field induces a magnetic field and vice versa.
Precisely the opposite. That I was suggesting that we change your perception of what ether is and how we involve ourselves with it in the technologies we embrace currently with hot power.
I'm afraid I can't agree in this space, like in the sense that like the induction of either magnetic or electric fields by either by current, so current generating a magnetic field, or inducing a electric current by moving a magnet. Like, those are well understood in terms of like the at least theoretically, okay, from the point of view of like sort of the interaction of the materials involved.
Okay,
The,
social, you're doing it
the
again, man. Hold it. No, you cannot say something is theoretically well understood. Okay, that is an oxymoron.
okay, well then I'll just say it's well
That's
understood.
funny as hell. Theoretically well understood.
Social, you
I,
got to stop talking in circles and embrace what I'm talking about. Try that
so so
instead. You'll get a lot farther.
so there is no, like, I there's no cognitive dissonance in EM field theory, I guess, in terms of like, I don't know any pockets where ether can occupy. I understand where ether can occupy for gravitation.
Ooh,
I
ether hot
don't.
pockets. Awesome.
Yeah, ether hot pockets, exactly.
Back to our pockets.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like, so yeah, so it makes sense to me. I can understand where there's room for talking about an ether with respect to gravitational
With respect
force,
to electromechanics,
but not with electromechanics. No.
well, that's exactly what we've been talking about for the past 15 minutes, and I have described it articulately, I think. Unless anybody in the room here would like to
And,
disagree
and,
and
and
want
I'll
further description, I could go deeper if you like what I meant by hot power. I'm sure you missed that one.
so strictly speaking, I mean, I can't refute any of this. I haven't read about counter space or Eric Dollard. My only thing, yeah. So the only thing I would ask is that in general in these discussions to post like specific references.
Oh, I've absolutely specified my references from Feynman to Dollard, haven't I?
Can you post something in the
Oh,
jumbotron?
come on. I think you can do that work all by yourself, Social. You're educated, right?
I can, but it means that
Okay, so we'll leave that
it, me-
burden to you.
no, but it means that it means that this conversation thread we can't really go further because I
Oh,
can't.
sure we can. I can take you much farther. Like what I think about cold power. Like first off, what's hot power?
Like again, I'm not like, this is sort of a
Okay, so
conversation that I kept
let's
anticipating.
embrace Kirchhoff for a second. Okay, I'm sure you know who he is. You were taught all about Kirchhoff, the law of resistance and the V, the I, the R thing.
Yeah,
Okay, great. Good. So you know that when you go down to the electronics store and you buy a resistor and say it's a 100 ohm resistor and it's rated at 5 watts and you take it home and you run a couple of watts through it for a couple of minutes, maybe 3 watts of power through this 5-watt rated resistor, what happens to the resistor? Two things. I'll help you out there, Social. It gets hot because that is resistance, electrical resistance to the resolution of charge being applied to it. Voltage on one side, ground on the other. That we're actually driving pressure through a dielectrically resistive material like a carbon or other mixed dope crap, anything, springs, all kinds of neat things used to produce a resistor. The point is it gets hot and its resistance decreases slightly as it gets hotter. Believe that, man. I've just take that one as rote. Okay, so this is what I'm defining as hot power. Okay, we're applying. Um, let's see. I guess both of them apply. That you could use either something held in a capacitor or a battery. As any kind of sulfation process, chemically speaking, to produce voltage. All those things are a hot source. Okay, now back to the coil with this electromagnetic process where and let's assume we're using a square wave, DC square wave going through the coil. Okay, you can picture what might happen on the oscilloscope when you do that. That you're going to see a square wave of voltage
yeah,
go up and then back to zero and then up and then back to zero, regardless of what the voltage is. That's what you're going to see on the scope. Okay, great. Well, what you're also going to see if you zoom in, the time constant of what you're looking at. When you turn the coil on and voltage goes up on the scope, and then it continues to spread across the meter over time, showing you that that voltage is being held because you're continuing to apply voltage to the coil, and the B field is constantly produced, right? That's all straightforward, I hope, in your head, because we were all taught that stuff. What happens when you cut the power to the coil during the initiation of the off phase? Are
It
you aware
continues
what
the
that looks
current.
like?
It
Pardon?
continues the current. It continues the current because you're talking about an inductor. You're
Actually, it's
talking
the
about
exact opposite again, social. The polarity spikes in the opposite direction to a nearly infinite voltage for a nearly zero length of time. And you've never been taught about that? The
sorry.
ambient radiant spike?
Are you talking like if you're talking about an inductor? Yes, like when you flick the power, it will induce a negative voltage in order to like continue the charge. So it'll induce like it basically yeah, and this only lasts like a moment, right?
Exactly.
You
It is
basically
the
just
decay of the
you
B
you
field.
describe what like is this
Follow
is
me
this
here,
going
social.
somewhere? This is a
Oh,
this is
it's social.
you
Have I
describe
gone? Social. Let me ask you a question here. Have I at any point tonight just talked in circles or gone in no direction with what I'm talking about? Have I not always gotten to the point? Okay.
eventually, but
I'm
it'd be
about
nice to
to
get to the
again.
connector.
I'm about to again. And it has to do with the beginning of the off phase at the square wave propagation here. That you have the coil charged and then all of a sudden you don't. What happens to the B field? And this is the effect. It is called the decay of the B field. And it is a catastrophic event, in my opinion, where you used to have north coming out the left side of the coil. All of a sudden it snaps back the other way. And this infinite voltage north flies out the other side of the coil for a really short period of time, like you said, a moment. Well, in terms of the conductor, voltage also is reversed. It's a negative radiant spike. And everybody in electrical school is taught how to attenuate it, ground it, filter it, get it the hell away from your sensitive
Correct.
silicone-based
Yeah.
ICs because it'll
Y
blow them out, right? They're
yeah,
not
because they're
rated for
they're
that
they're
kind of voltage,
yeah, because
okay?
there's known inductors, so you can use inductors in circuits, but there's also inductors that are created by the circuits themselves. You could have like depending on the frequency, you can have things that act as inductors.
Sure,
So
you can have one-turn
again,
inductors just because of the way you line up your circuit on the board. You can, but
100%.
that's not what I'm
So
talking about here. I'm talking about the decay of the B field inside this typical coil. Just follow what I'm talking about. Don't bring up a
okay,
bunch of other stuff. Just that is what I call, and many other people call, cold power. And what I mean by that is that when you create a machine that involves applying a square wave to a coil to, say, repel a magnet that has been approaching the coil, but now you want it to keep on going by, you hit it with the other polarity and you drive the magnet away. But when you stop driving the magnet away, the coil in its off phase, this voltage shoots back out the other side. That's the cold part. If you take that voltage and you reroute it, so to speak, through the creative use of diodes back towards the power source, you're going to find that when you drive that coil through any kind of conduit, it's got a natural resistivity to the conduit, right? And you might even want to save power between your voltage source and the coil and put a resistor in between the two. And when you do that, okay, and this you're invoking the magnetoelectric effect, the decay of this B field, and you're taking that charge and putting it back the other way, so to speak, into the same conduit, that resistor runs colder than ambient. And engineers simply cannot explain it. It's something that I put into a live stream on my very own channel on Telegram. You guys might want to look up that some other time. But it's very important as a phenomenon because I'm here to stress that at the post-sec level, you guys are taught Kirchhoff. You guys are taught hot power. You guys are taught that the system can only lose energy. You guys are taught that radiant spikes are bad. You just have to get rid of it, that it is waste. And I'm
So,
saying it's not. I'm saying it's not
so,
waste. I'm saying it's actually better. And it's something that we can use a little bit of power to pump the coil and then turn it off and take a lot more out the backside. And I think that is a
so
thoroughly
Stone.
underexploited technology.
So Stone, just to give a little bit of my background, I spent 5 years working for basically a contract engineering services firm, and every single year we had at least 3 people a year who would contact us and try to get us to build them a perpetual motion machine. And it's
Why are you
embarrassing
talking about that?
because what you just described is a perpetual motion machine. You're describing a circuit that violates
No,
the
I
laws.
haven't.
No, you're literally describing a machine that violates the laws of thermodynamics. We have so many people that come to us, and they would be all cagey about it. It's like, I've discovered free energy, and they come to us and they ask us to build it, and they come to us with like tens of thousands of dollars, and we have to tell them, dude, we can't take your money. This is not, you can't do this. And so I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to leave the conversation there. I'll leave the mic to
So
somebody else.
That's hilarious. Social. The first thing that I covered here was how you embrace Kirchhoff. And that was what you were taught in post-secondary. You were taught that that was law, and there just ain't no other way about it. Anybody else tries to jump the fence, they're violating the laws of thermodynamics. Um, Again, sophistry. We're
Try
talking
try
about
try and
science
build
here,
the machine
right?
you're saying.
We're talking
Try and
about
build the machine you're saying.
science here, and I'm certainly not talking about anything perpetual. I am talking about an energy source that has been incorrectly exploited. Okay.
By all means, try and create something that creates more energy. But use the
I
principle you just
already
said
Social
have.
and
I
try and
he
have
didn't
build
say
it.
that.
actually scope data to show you that I have. Maybe I'll bring it next week and I'll dig up the scope shot.
He
I
never
can
he
promise
never
you that
claimed it was
nobody.
perpetual.
Hold on 1 second. Mouse, you keep on coming off of mic. You got a lot of background noise. So please, before you come off of mic, raise your hand. We'll get to you. But you have to eliminate the background noise because we cannot hear anything that's going on when you open up your mic. So even if you wanted to speak, we couldn't even hear you. So please get that under control. I appreciate it. Stone, finish your thought, and I think Bardick wanted to chime in, and then we'll slide over to Mouse to see if Mouse want to say something after that.
You bet. Okay, so again, I'm not talking about any kind of perpetual motion. I'm talking about electromechanics. Okay, and something that is seriously underdeveloped, underexploited, undereducated in the mainstream. And I see a lot of people with the thumbs up going, yeah, that's exactly what's going on. Because we all have been there, social. What you told me is that you spent 5 years in a mainstream echo chamber. Okay. You did not sit 5 years with people with objective, open minds looking for the truth. And that
I
is the
spent
difference.
5 years
You know
building
what
stuff.
expired means, right?
Yeah, Mouse, you didn't really resolve the issue. Can you please mute? Thank you. Sorry, continue, lads.
Nope, I was done.
Yeah, to be fair, social, he never claimed perpetual. He claimed underutilized. So just
No,
he-
but the circuit that he described, the thing that he described, where you just need to give it a little nudge and it will spit out more energy than you gave in your little nudge. That is by def. I mean, there's tons of videos of people trying to claim that they discovered this ocean of free energy, and they're hiding from the CIA because they're afraid of getting killed, and all of that is bunk. Like I promise you, like we could have made tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, on off people who came to us with these like quote unquote prototypes, and we just had to tell them, look, I'm sorry, man, like we're not going to take your money. This is this is not going to work.
so what is
Okay.
that to you? Like for you, what is that when that happens?
It's hilarious. It's
No, I
misguided.
mean the actual energy spike, as it were.
It's a property of the inductor. Like it's like if you like it's basically like just how when you have the charge kind of moving through a coil, when you immediately turn off the power, that last bit of charge is still going through the coil. It's still inducing. It's still like inducing a little bit of that. It's basically what happens is like you're reversing the magneto effect. So rather than rather than the charge inducing a magnetic field, all of a sudden there's a little bit of magnetic field that keeps the charge going for like a microsecond. And
But
that's all
it doesn't keep it going. It goes to the opposite polarity catastrophically. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the opposite. Yeah.
it goes to the opposite polarity, because when you cut off the power, when you switch off the voltage and the current is still going, what you're doing is you're creating a negative potential
Okay,
on
there we are
which
with
is a negative
another
voltage.
oxymoron. You cut off the power, but the current is still going. Where's it going if you cut it off, man? That's an oxymoron. You cannot analyze things on those terms
So it
and
induces
succeed in any way.
it induces a little bit of current that like you acknowledged, that negative voltage is only there for a microsecond. So that process of the inductor wanting to continue the current flow for a moment, that's what creates the negative potential.
Social. Come on.
Where once there was yeah.
Nomenclature again. There is no current in an open circuit. Okay.
Hold on, y'all think that the electricity is flowing like just a straight line? It don't flow like that. It flows like water. If it hits a dead end, it waves back and comes back at itself. It doesn't flow just direction.
That's a good analogy, but I think we're pretty done roasting social here. Should we move on to somebody else? And it's 4 a.m. my time, guys. I think I better punch out.
Hey, Stone, thank you, bro. That was so educational. Much appreciated, man. And Social, thanks for the back and forth, man. You were very you were very cordial, and thanks for pulling back up and coming more prepared and admitting that last week, you were ill prepared. That's awesome, dude. Much appreciated. You guys had a great build.
It is my absolute pleasure. Thanks, Alan. And thanks to you, Sacred, for allowing me the time. And if you like, I will come back next week. I have a particular shot of my oscilloscope, which I've applied a graphic to show you the difference in terms of total energy
Make
on
sure.
to off. Hey, mouse, get it under control. Anyways, that's my open offer.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you, Stone. Hey,
Get
y'all follow
what under
Stone.
control that you
All
have.
right, Miles. All right. You doing too much. You doing too much. Anyway, shout out to Stone. Y'all follow Stone. That's my guy. And y'all see dripping sauce all over the place. This is only like the surface level of a wealth of knowledge from this man. Y'all pop over to BitChute, tap in with us on Discord, follow Stone on Twitter, and come get that work, man. Appreciate you, Stone.
Many thanks. We'll see you next time, Space Campers.
Yo, later, Stone. That was awesome. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, man. The first time I heard Stone speak over on Discord, I was just wild. I'm like, man, the more you guys tap in with like some of these conversations, you're gonna hear some of the great minds in the community. And this was just recently too. I think I just met Stone maybe about a month or two ago, maybe. So I feel like I've been missing out. Crazy. Shout out to my guy for pulling up.